The final bell rang at exactly midnight. Its sound wasn't sharp like the usual school bell. It was deep, like it came from under the earth, rolling through the stone corridors of Abongweni boarding school like thunder wrapped in a funeral song. Students froze in their beds, wide-eyed. Some thought they were dreaming. Others checked the time. It was midnight. That bell was never supposed to ring at night. Ever. Chinello, a quiet girl with a scar above her eyebrow, sat upright in her bunk. She had heard that sound once before, from her grandmother's lips, not her ears. "When the bell tolls where no bell stands," her grandmother had whispered, "the ancestors are awake, and time will bleed." Down the hall, a boy named Kwame grabbed his phone. Midnight, then 12:01, then 12:02. He blinked. Still 12 o'clock. The clock reset. He blinked again. 12 o'clock. His screen flickered. So did the hallway lights. Someone screamed from the girls' dorm. By the time the teachers arrived, everyone had heard it. The bell. But there was no bell tower. The school had none. Burnt down decades ago in a fire no one liked to talk about. Morning never came. The sun didn't rise. Instead, the clock struck midnight again. And again. Day after day, or what they thought were days, the students were stuck in the same hour. The food stayed warm in the dining hall. Cuts didn't heal. Shadows moved on their own. Fear turned to madness. But it was Chinello who remembered the legend fully. The bell was not a warning. It was a lock. To break it, they'd have to find the one story their great-grandparents refused to tell. And tell it aloud before time looped again. The second time the bell rang, it was louder. Too loud. The sound poured through the halls like hot oil, seeping into the bones of the school. Students bolted upright in their beds, their screams caught in their throats. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with every beat of the bell. Chinello didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the old journal resting on her lap, the one her grandmother had left her before passing. Until now, the leather-bound book had seemed useless, a dusty heirloom filled with riddles and lullabies. But tonight, under the flickering light of her bedside lamp, a page she had never seen before was glowing faintly. The words read, "Where time forgets the sun, truth must be spoken in shadow." Down the hallway, Kwame pounded on her door. He was pale and sweating. "It's happening again," he said. "It's still midnight." Ayo and Zinzi trailed behind him, both visibly shaken. "We've tried everything," Zinzi said. "I cut my hand, it healed. Ayo smashed a window, it's whole again. Time's not moving, we're stuck." Chinello flipped through the journal, her fingers trembling. She stopped at a hand-drawn sketch of a horned mask, one that looked eerily similar to a carving above the dining hall's arch. This means something," she whispered. They hurried to the teacher's lounge, breaking into the principal's office. Behind old paperwork and dusty awards, they found a small locked cabinet. Chinello recognized the symbol etched into the wood. It matched the mask in her book. Inside was a single cassette tape marked 1975, Emergency Broadcast. They huddled around a cassette player and pressed play. The voice on the tape was old, shaky, terrified. "If you're hearing this, the bell has rung again. The seal is broken. Whatever you do, don't let them follow the ink." The recording ended in a high-pitched static. Then, for the third time, the bell rang. Midnight struck again. No moonlight filtered through the windows. The stars were absent, like the sky itself had closed its eyes. Inside the dormitory, silence crept like a predator, interrupted only by the rhythmic ticking of clocks that never moved. Zinzi awoke in a cold sweat, eyes wide with fear. Chinello sat beside her, watching. "You were whispering in your sleep," she said softly. "But it wasn't English. It sounded ancient." Zinzi rubbed her temples. "I saw a fire and drums. People wearing masks, like that one in your book. The four students regrouped in Chinello's room. Tension hung in the air. Desperate for answers, they began tearing the place apart, searching every crack and corner for something, anything that might explain the loop. That's when Ayo found it. Under Chinello's bed, nestled between a loose floorboard and dust-covered beams, was a stone. Dark red, rough, warm to the touch. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "It wasn't here yesterday," he said. Kwame picked it up. Instantly, a piercing scream ripped through their minds. Not from outside, but inside, like their thoughts were being torn open. Each of them dropped to the floor, clutching their heads. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the scream stopped. And so did the world. The hallway beyond the door flickered like an old film reel. For a split second, the school was gone. In its place stood a burning forest. Ash rained down like snow. A young girl stood barefoot in the flames, her hands bound, her mouth stitched shut. She looked directly at them. Then the vision vanished. Chinello's journal now had a new line written in glowing ink. "The stone is memory. It feeds the loop. One must bleed where one first bled." She touched the scar on her eyebrow, heart pounding. Outside, slow, deliberate footsteps echoed in the corridor. Then came the knock. 1, 2, 3. And the bell rang again. The knock reverberated like a warning shot. When they opened the door, no one was there. Only a trail of black ink smeared across the floor, as if something had been bleeding shadows. Ayo bent down and dipped his finger in the substance. It was thick, almost oily, and it didn't smear when he rubbed it between his fingers. "It's not paint," he muttered. "It's alive." Zinzi pointed to the hallway mirror, cracked along one edge. That wasn't broken before. They approached it cautiously. Chinello looked into the glass and gasped. Her reflection wasn't alone. Behind her stood a woman, half her face obscured by tangled dreadlocks, the other covered in tribal paint. Her eyes were hollow, and her mouth was stitched shut with thin gold wire. She didn't move, but her hand slowly lifted and pressed against the inside of the mirror. Then came the whisper, not from the room, but from inside the mirror itself. "Find her name. Speak it before the last ring, or remain shadows." The mirror fogged over, and letters began to appear as if drawn by invisible fingers. E-S-I. Chinello staggered back. "That's my great-grandmother's name." The others stared wide-eyed. They decided to follow the trail of ink, which now stretched down to the school's basement, an area supposedly sealed since the 1970s fire. As they descended, the temperature dropped. The lights flickered. The air smelled of wet earth and ash. Inside the basement, they found a collection of old student portraits. Dozens of faces stared out, but their features had been violently scratched away. Only one remained untouched. A girl in a school uniform from decades ago. Her nameplate read, "A.C. Abongweni." Chinello stepped closer. The girl in the portrait had her same scar. Then, as if sensing they'd gone too far, the air around them howled. The horned mask formed again from the dripping ink. It hovered, its mouth open in silent agony. "You've seen too much," it whispered, and the bell rang again. The bell faded, but the echo lingered like the tale of a nightmare. The ink mask dissolved into smoke, and the air in the basement shifted, as if the school itself was holding its breath. Chinello reached out to touch the portrait of A.C. Abongweni. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the girl's eyes, eyes that looked far too familiar. "I think she's me," Chinello said. Zinzi's voice cracked. "Number she was your great-grandmother, but something's wrong with time." They heard a creak from behind them. A teacher, Mr. Modiwa, stood at the top of the basement stairs, eyes wide in horror. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "That part of the school was sealed for a reason." Kwame stepped forward. "You know what's happening, don't you?" Mr. Mudawa didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of parchment. I found this the last time the bell rang, in 1994. Chinello's breath caught. The bell rang before? He nodded grimly. It always does, once every generation. And each time it demands the same thing, a sacrifice to reset the balance. One child must stay behind. Their soul feeds the bell. Ayo clenched his fists. So this is a ritual? A curse, Mr. Mudiwa corrected. Cast by Isi. She tried to save the school, but she broke the order. The loop was her punishment. He handed the parchment to Chinello. It was a map, drawn in charcoal, stained by time. A single spot was circled in red. The cradle of the bell. Below it, scrawled in jagged ink, the name must be spoken in truth. Not remembered, not written, spoken. But beware. Names carry power. Zinzi leaned in. We need to find that place. Chinello stared at the name. Essie. It felt heavy on her tongue. So she whispered it aloud. Essie. The walls shuddered, and then the bell rang again. The school groaned like a wounded beast. The moment Chinello whispered Essie, the very foundations of Abongweni trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lights burst, plunging them into darkness broken only by the trembling glow of Ayo's phone flashlight. Mr. Mudiwa turned pale. You spoke it, he whispered. You called her. Chinello's voice was steady. She's already here. The group didn't wait. They followed the map from the parchment, winding through rusted service corridors, past forgotten rooms lined with locked cabinets and desks draped in spider webs. The air grew colder. The deeper they went, the more the walls changed. Stone replaced concrete, as if they had stepped back into a time before the school existed. At the end of a narrow passage, they found a wooden door carved with the symbol of the horned mask. It wasn't painted. It was scorched into the wood, black and jagged. Chinello touched it. The door creaked open. Inside was a small chamber. In the center stood a bell, not metal, but carved from obsidian. It stood on a circular dais, surrounded by symbols drawn in salt and ash. Around the edges of the room were bones, some human, some not. The cradle of the bell, Zinzi said in awe. It's real. Ayo stepped forward, running his hand along the bell's surface. It was warm. Don't touch it, Mr. Mudiwa barked. The bell doesn't just trap time, it feeds on memory. It erases what it doesn't want you to know. Kwame knelt beside the bell and found an inscription in an old Akan dialect. Chinello translated slowly, her voice shaking. To ring the bell is to call the guardian. To speak the truth is to face the lie. To break the loop, one must return what was stolen. Suddenly, the bell rang on its own, and the chamber went black. The darkness inside the cradle of the bell was not ordinary. It was thick, suffocating, alive. Ayo's flashlight flickered and died. Zinzi screamed as something brushed past her leg. Kwame whispered Chinello's name, but even his voice sounded distant, like it was being swallowed by the room. Then came the footsteps. Slow, bare, wet. They echoed from all directions, as if the chamber stretched far beyond its walls. A dull red glow began to pulse from the bell's base, revealing shadows shifting along the walls. Then the glow caught it. The mask. It floated 6 feet above the ground, the horned visage twisting slowly. The black ink that once dripped from its eyes now bled freely, soaking the floor. But this time, it had a body. The figure wore a school uniform, faded and torn. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted unnaturally. Where skin should have been was darkness, shifting smoke in the shape of a girl. Essie. No one leaves, the figure said in a voice that layered 100 others. Girls, boys, teachers, elders, all speaking at once. You broke the seal. You spoke my name. Mr. Mudiwa stepped forward, arms raised. "She's not ready. Give us more time." The figure turned its mask toward him. "Time is not yours to keep." In a sudden surge, the masked figure charged. Kwame yanked Mr. Mudiwa back just in time. Chinelo grabbed the journal and held it high. "Essie, we don't want to trap you. We want to finish what you started." The figure paused, its head tilted. The mask cracked, just slightly. Then it whispered, "Then you must return." The chamber lit up in red. The floor beneath them vanished. And they fell. Through time, through memory, through screams that weren't theirs. And still, the bell rang. They fell without falling, suspended in a weightless void where voices drifted like smoke. Some screamed, others sang lullabies in forgotten dialects. Chinelo reached for the others but couldn't see her own hands. The darkness wasn't empty. It was crowded, with memories, with ghosts. Then her feet hit ground. Hard. She opened her eyes and gasped. They stood in the same school, Abongweni. But it was no longer decayed and haunted. It was alive. The corridors were lit with oil lamps, the walls freshly painted with tribal murals long erased by time. Outside, the moon hung high, and students in older uniforms walked the halls, chatting and laughing, unaware of the nightmare awaiting them. Ayo blinked. Did we just go back? It's 1975, Chinelo said, stunned. The night the bell rang for Essie. They quickly realized they were invisible to everyone around them, witnesses in a memory too powerful to ignore. The group watched as a younger Essie walked past them, her face full of defiance. She carried a bundle wrapped in red cloth. Behind her followed 3 masked elders, one with fire painted on his mask, one with tears, one with roots. "She's taking something," Zinzi whispered. "Something sacred." They trailed Essie through the courtyard to a hidden shrine behind the school, where she placed the red bundle on a stone pedestal. "She's trying to stop the ritual," Kwame realized. "She's stealing the bell's power." Suddenly a crack tore through the air. Avilam sakitota a eget. Time fractured. Everything shimmered. Students froze mid-step. Walls pulsed like breathing flesh, and the horned mask reappeared, looming over the scene like a vengeful god. It screamed, not aloud, but inside their bones. The world spun again. The group landed hard, back in the present, gasping for air. And the bell rang. This time, the sound came from inside them. They lay on the floor of the cradle, gasping. But something was different. Zinzi sat up first, gripping her arm. "Did you feel that?" "It was like my blood turned cold." Ayo wiped sweat from his brow. "We were in the past, not just watching something attached to us." Chinelo stood slowly, clutching the journal to her chest. "It's Essie. She didn't just break the ritual, she bound herself to the memory, to us." Kwame stared at the bell. The obsidian now shimmered with symbols that hadn't been there before. They pulsed red, then gold, shifting like flame. "The bell's changing. It knows we saw." Mr. Mudiwa was quiet. Too quiet. They turned to find him kneeling by the wall, staring at something carved into the stone. "She left a message," he whispered. "Here, for the next who dares to speak her name." The carving read, "They will say I cursed the school, but I only gave it truth. To break the loop, the name must not just be spoken, it must be accepted." Chinelo's voice cracked. "Accepted by who?" Before anyone could answer, the bell glowed brightly. The walls trembled. Smoke poured from its base and took shape. 3 tall figures in elder masks, just like the ones they'd seen in 1975. Their eyes glowed like embers. One of them stepped forward and pointed to Chinelo. "You carry the scar." The second nodded. "You spoke the name." The third hissed. "But do you accept the burden?" She trembled. What burden? The air thickened. The smoke elders chanted in unison, "Become the vessel, or be consumed." The bell rang again, this time softer, almost sad, and a single line burned into the wall behind Chinello. "Choose before the final ring." The bell's echo faded, but its message lingered in the silence like the scent of smoke after fire. "Choose before the final ring." Chinello turned to Mr. Mudawa, her voice hoarse. "What does it mean to become the vessel?" He didn't answer at first. His gaze was locked on the wall where Essie's words had once burned. "In every loop," he finally said, "one is chosen. Not to die, but to carry the curse, to hold it, to keep it from spreading." Zinzi stepped forward. "Like a guardian?" Mr. Mudiwa nodded. "Or a prison?" Kwame clenched his jaw. "And what if no one chooses?" Mr. Mudiwa looked him dead in the eyes. "Then the loop becomes permanent. The bell tolls forever. Everyone trapped, no past, no future. Just midnight." They sat in silence for a long time, the flickering torchlight casting strange shadows across their faces. Chinello opened the journal. More writing had appeared, faded but fresh. "I took the curse into myself to save them. But I was not the last. The bell waits always for another. My blood remembers. My name endures." Chinello traced the words with her fingers. Her heart ached, not with fear, but recognition. Essie hadn't just been her ancestor. She had been the first to resist, the first to fight the cycle. And now, the burden passed to her. "I think it has to be me," Chinello whispered. "No," Kwame said firmly. "We find another way." "There might not be another way," Zinzi said. "Look at the signs, the visions, the mask choosing her. It's already begun." Suddenly Ayo gasped. His arm was glowing. A symbol, the same horned mask, had burned itself into his skin. "I didn't choose," he whispered, "but it chose you." Then the bell rang again. Ayo stared at the mark glowing on his arm, breath short, heart pounding. "No," he muttered. "I didn't agree to this." Chinello knelt beside him, trying to steady him. The mark pulsed, the lines of the horned mask shifting as if it were alive beneath his skin. "The bell chose," she whispered. "It's never asked for permission." Kwame stood rigid. "Then we need to force it to choose again. If Ayo becomes the vessel, he won't survive it. He's not connected like Chinello." Zinzi snapped. "You think dying by choice is better than being taken? There has to be another path." Ayo clenched his fists. "It's not about who deserves it. It's about ending this." They turned to Mr. Mudiwa, who still hadn't moved. "Tell us," Chinello demanded. "Can we break the loop without offering a vessel?" He hesitated. "There are stories of a counter-ritual, one that doesn't seal the curse but banishes it, a way to destroy the bell itself." Chinello's eyes widened. "How?" "It's dangerous, forbidden. If it fails, it enrages the spirits bound to the bell, and the loop resets violently. People die. Sometimes, everyone." Ayo stood up. "Then that's the path we take, because I'm not letting this thing use me." Kwame stepped forward. "Where do we start?" Mr. Mudiwa exhaled shakily. "We'll need to go to the Well of Silence, a hidden chamber beneath the library. It was where Essie first touched the bell, where her defiance began." "The Well of Silence," Zinzi repeated. "Sounds like a lovely tourist spot." But Chinello didn't laugh. She was staring at Ayo's arm. The mark had stopped glowing, but it wasn't gone. It had changed. Now, beneath the horned mask, was a number. 4. Ayo swallowed hard. "For what?" The bell rang before anyone could answer. The bell's toll echoed like a death knell, and silence settled over them like dust. They stared at Ayo's arm. The 4 beneath the mask pulsed red, the lines sharp, etched deep into his skin like they'd always been there. "For what?" Zinzi whispered. Chinello's voice was low. "Rings. Kwame's brow furrowed. You think it's counting down? Mr. Mudiwa nodded grimly. Each ring seals fate. If the bell rings 4 more times, the choice is locked. The vessel is consumed, and the loop continues. Forever. Ayo pulled his sleeve down. Then we stop it before it rings again. The group didn't wait. Guided by the cryptic knowledge in Chinello's journal, they hurried through hidden corridors behind the library, a maze of forgotten spaces layered with cobwebs and ancient carvings. Time felt fragile here. They passed doors that shouldn't have existed, rooms filled with desks from decades ago, walls scribbled with words in ash. At last, they reached a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The air grew cold and still, like even time refused to follow. At the bottom stood a massive wooden door, twisted, warped, and breathing. This is it, Mr. Mudiwa said. The Well of Silence. He placed his palm against the door. It resisted him at first, then opened with a moan like a wounded animal. Inside there was no sound, not even footsteps. Just a circular chamber with a dry well at its center, surrounded by old ceremonial masks, each hanging upside down. The well used to be filled with water, Chinello murmured. But now it holds echoes. They approached slowly. As Ayo peered over the edge, a whisper rose from the depths, louder than any shout. 4 shall fall. 1 shall carry. Ayo's mark shifted again. Now it read 3. And then the bell rang. The bell's echo faded, but the silence that followed was worse. It felt final. Ayo looked down at his arm. The number had changed again. 3. 3 rings left. 3 chances to stop the curse or be swallowed by it. But then something else changed. The air inside the Well of Silence grew heavier. The hanging masks along the walls began to turn one by one, their hollow eyes facing inward. Zinzi gasped. They're watching us. From the dry well a voice rose, not loud but clear. The first has been marked. Before they could move, a gust of wind slammed the chamber door shut. The torches flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. A scream pierced the silence. It was Mr. Mudiwa. They turned their flashlights and found him convulsing on the floor, his hand over his chest. His mouth opened, but no words came, only dust. His eyes rolled back. A shadow peeled itself off the wall and crawled toward him, black and jagged, wearing a mask of flame. "Help me," he rasped. But it was too late. The shadow entered him. His body froze, then slowly lifted into the air. For a moment, Mr. Mudiwa hovered like a puppet on strings. Then he turned toward Chinello and spoke with 2 voices, his own and something older. The bell must feed. He collapsed, limp, dead. The room fell silent again, except for the rustling of the masks. They all turned to face Ayo. Zinzi stepped back. It's not just a countdown. It's a cost. Kwame gritted his teeth. 3 more. 3 must fall. Chinello knelt beside Mr. Mudiwa, eyes burning. Then we change the rules. She stood, holding the journal tight. No more sacrifices. We find the source. We end it at the root. The walls whispered in response. Then hurry. 2 shadows rise, and the bell rang. The ringing faded into a low hum that seemed to bleed from the walls. Chinello felt it in her teeth, in her bones, like the whole school was now vibrating with the bell's rhythm. Ayo backed away from Mr. Mudiwa's lifeless body. His arm glowed again. 2. Zinzi cursed under her breath. 2 more. Then he's... No, Chinello snapped. We are not letting the bell choose who lives or dies. But the chamber offered no comfort. The upside-down masks began to cry, thick black tears that dripped onto the stone floor and hissed like acid. We need to go, Kwame said. Now. They fled the Well of Silence, retracing their steps. But something was different in the halls now. The doors they had passed before were missing. The corridors stretched in wrong directions, looping back to where they started. The school was twisting, turning against them. "It's changing the layout," Zinzi said. "It doesn't want us to leave." Then, from the shadows ahead, something moved. Tall, fast, silent. It had no face, no eyes. Just a figure cloaked in ash, its presence pulling warmth from the air. Chinelo stopped. A shadow. One of the two. It stepped into the light and the group froze. It wore the school's prefect badge. "That's my old dorm monitor," Kwame whispered. "But he died last year." The figure lunged. They ran. Twisting through corridors that no longer obeyed logic, they finally slammed a door behind them and barricaded it. The thing scratched once on the wood, then left. Inside the room, they found old student records, forgotten files, and a name circled over and over in red ink, S.C. Abongweni. But below it was a second name, faded, half scratched out, Chinelo Abongweni. Zinzi looked at her. "This isn't your first loop, is it?" The bell rang before Chinelo could answer. Chinelo couldn't breathe. Her name, written below Isi's, was old, weathered, archived. Not a mistake, not a coincidence. Kwame stepped forward, eyes wide. "You were here before?" Chinelo shook her head, but not with certainty. "Number I don't remember. I couldn't." Zinzi picked up the student file. The paper was brittle, edges yellowed. It was an official record from 1975. The year the bell last rang. Under transfer record, Chinelo's name appeared again, written in neat cursive. "But that's impossible," Ayo said. "You'd have to be, what, in your 50s? Chinelo backed away. "This isn't right. My grandmother, Essie, was the last." Zinzi placed a hand on her shoulder. "What if Isi wasn't just your grandmother? What if you were her?" "No," Chinelo said, her voice trembling. "She died. She was erased," Kwame said softly. "The bell doesn't kill. It erases. That's what Mudiwa meant by memory feeding it." They turned to the record again. There, beneath Chinelo's name, in a field labeled status. Missing. Presumed absorbed. Ayo stepped back. "You've been through the loop before. You broke it once, and the bell pulled you back." Suddenly, Chinelo dropped to her knees. Her head throbbed. Flashes burst behind her eyes. Drums, masks, fire. A voice chanting in her own mouth. A name screamed in the dark. She looked up, tears falling. "I remember." They helped her to her feet, just as the hallway beyond the room went dark again. Two shadows passed. One wore a flaming mask. The other, half-formed, wore Chinelo's face. Her old face. Zinzi swallowed. "What happens when the bell reaches one?" Chinelo turned slowly toward the door. "It rings for me." And as if in reply, the bell rang again. Now Ayo's mark read, 1. The sound of the 16th bell toll was not like the others. It rang slow, deep, final. Ayo clutched his arm and dropped to one knee. The mark on his skin blazed now, burning through the sleeve of his shirt. The number had changed. 1. "One more ring," he whispered. "Then I'm gone." "No," Chinelo said firmly, rushing to him. "We still have time. The loop hasn't sealed yet. We can end this another way." Zinzi turned toward the window. Except there was no window anymore. Only swirling darkness outside the school, like they'd been swallowed whole by time itself. Kwame rifled through the old student files, flipping pages, looking for answers. There has to be something. Essie's notes, a warning, anything. Then, tucked into the back of Chinelo's own archived folder, he found a torn piece of parchment. On it, written in blood-colored ink, "The bell breaks when the bound forgives the forgotten. Not a sacrifice. A release." Chinelo stared at it, then at the group. "Forgive the forgotten. It's not the bell that's hungry. It's the memory of what we did to stop it. Io's voice was strained. You mean Isi? No, she said, eyes narrowing. I mean all of them, the students, the ones who were erased, trapped in loops before ours. The bell is full of them. It remembers what we choose to forget. Suddenly, the walls shuddered. A crack formed along the ceiling. From it spilled light, red and gold, flickering like fire and ash. A voice boomed from above. Not Essie's, not the mask's, older. One more ring, one more soul, one final loop. They ran, back to the cradle of the bell. The stone chamber was glowing, the obsidian bell humming like it was alive. Io turned to Chinello, sweat pouring down his face. If it rings again, I disappear. Chinello stepped forward, placing her hand on the bell. No, she said. If it rings again, I remember everything. And the bell began to ring.